Hello, everybody. Welcome to Maddox Scale and Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching Orchestrating Seamless Digital Experiences, and I'm super excited to introduce our speaker. And as I introduce him, I'm going to have him answer a quick icebreaker question. So with us today is Scott Wilder, Head of Digital Success and Self-Serve at Clary. And before I continue, Scott, here's the quick icebreaker question for you. If you could, what's one thing that you would choose to scale in your personal life?
So there's two tracks here, and they both involve baseball since I love baseball. One is my knowledge of baseball metrics or analytics, because it seems like every year it evolves. And two is I'm coaching Little League. So I'd like to coach probably high school next year and then the year after college.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love that answer. That's the most unique one that I've had so far. So that's awesome. So prior to being the VP of Customer and Partner at Clary, Scott Wilder was a Vice President of Customer and Partner and Community Growth and Engagement at Base. And he was also the Global Head of Customer Engagement and Community at HubSpot. So before we get started, just a reminder to everybody in the audience to please add any questions that you have to the chat here inside of Demio. Any questions that we don't get to today, we'll share with our speakers after the session, and we'll post the answers alongside the session recording in the Resource Hub when the session goes live. So with that, Scott, I'll hand it over to you, and we'll enjoy the session today.
Great. Thank you. So yeah, I'll try and get to your questions since I'll only be speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes. And if I have to punt to the end of the session, I will let you know. I use a lot of sports analogies, but I'll try and stay away from those as well. So some people want to know who is Clary and what is Clary. So we like to say that we run revenue, which basically means really tracking your revenue and treating it as a business process and making sure we have a term called revenue leakage. So making sure that you keep track of all those different touch points you have with prospects and with customers so that you can potentially optimize your offering to them so that you can understand their needs better, et cetera. So revenue is not just an outcome, it's a business process. And I think a lot of us, especially on the CS side, are very process oriented. So hopefully you appreciate that. We all have our idols and our mentors, and a few of us probably have Steve Jobs. He mentioned this during the Stanford presentation, Stanford graduation way back, and it really stuck with me. And is one of the key principles in my life is really stepping back and thinking about how the past has impacted the present. And so later today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how my previous experiences in orchestrating collaboration, either internally or externally, has impacted what I do. But first, you probably want to know who is Wilder. So I picked kind of two big themes in my life. That's me just a few years ago playing basketball. And then on the right-hand side is I've traveled quite a bit in my life. In fact, I spent my 20s living overseas for about 8 years. And again, in terms of connecting the dots and thinking back in life, I look at the different themes. And so one theme is I've always loved teams, which is why I want to talk about orchestrating in a collaborative environment. And then two is the journey. And so I'll talk a little bit about the journeys I've taken. And all that has really influenced the teams that I've worked on, and very passionate about the teams I've worked on. On the left-hand side is Base, which provides technology to track the life cycle and advocacy. Adobe, I think you all know, and Intuit as well. And I think the interesting thing about teams is I actually stay in touch with everybody, almost everybody, say 80% that are in these photos now. As some of you know, I'm in the digital self-serve space. And one thing to know is we don't report directly up into customer success. We report up into the chief customer officer. And I also say success and self-serve because internally we say self-serve, but externally self-serve tends to mean more support than what digital success or digital customer success would do. At the end of the day, though, I look at the team, I look at our group as being a force multiplier. So really focus on how we can make different parts of the organization stronger and just empower the customer to either learn our products, to master their craft, or accelerate their career. So, orchestrating digital success, I'm going to talk about 7 stories. I tried to find a good slide for the 7 C's here. So each of these stories I talk about, the things to notice is the first three are going to be about internal collaboration and cross-functional work, and the next three stories are going to be about collaborating with customers, and I'm very passionate about that. And then the last one's a little bit of something different. So let's talk about Intuit first. When I was at Intuit, so in order to really jumpstart cross collaboration for digital projects, digital products, so then the outcomes, the digital products were digital marketing, digital content, etc. Um, we basically had our team move around the company every 6 months, which is kind of unique. So every 6 months, I reported to either product, marketing, customer success, etc. And in doing that, it enabled me to hold those teams accountable better because I was part of the teams in terms of meeting those digital success goals. And then the last thing was we were able to implement digital self-serve in the product. So again, I think the key takeaways here are, when you work cross-functionally, it's one thing to be kind of holding hands cross-functionally. It's another thing to be in the same circle with them. And then once you're on their team, it's easier to hold them accountable. And I don't mean that in like, not with a stick or a carrot, just kind of a well-negotiated accountability. And then the last thing is for any folks that have done their taxes, one of the digital self-serve features we put together is basically within the product, you could interact with an expert or see community-related content. And Pam, you asked if it was a nightmare. It really wasn't. I think, again, maybe it's part of my DNA that I'm comfortable moving around from country to country. And I was comfortable from moving group to group. I think the one thing was get an alignment that our OKRs, our GMTs, whatever, our goals would differ every 6 months. I will say though, we did have one common metric, which was engagement and whether or not an account or user is active. And so we did track that across all groups. So I talk about sitting with teams, and Marketo, this was pre-COVID. The marketing team was on the third floor, and the product team was on the fourth floor, or vice versa. And I think it's really important to sit with those teams, physically sit with them, attend their staff meetings. It's just, it's different to like get on a Zoom and you have your own team meeting and then another staff meeting. So one of the things that we've done at Marketo and I've done it at Clary is really attending the other staff meetings. And what we've done as well is we have one person on our team who's responsible for making sure that we're aligned with marketing, making sure we're aligned with product. So I think when you think about cross-functional work, sitting with those teams is really important. And again, I constantly emphasize that, they were creating these customer portals and treating them as a product. So I talk a lot about being customer first, but then also having a product mindset for all this work. The third example of cross-functional work is when I was at Adobe. It was really interesting. So I was brought in Adobe to work in product marketing. I'd love to say it was my idea, but it wasn't. And then, but one of the ideas was let's form these growth squads. And so I was on one of the first growth squads. And what they consisted of was 5 people from different disciplines. We were heavily encouraged or deeply encouraged not to use other people in the company or resources. And we were focused on a single goal, right? So I think one of the times is, if you're doing digital success, you can get pulled in different directions. So really being clear about what the single goal was. When I was at Adobe, we were focused on Lightroom as the product. And the goal was, I call it the waltz, was how really tracking what's the time that somebody imports a photo, what's the time they edit the photo, and what's the time that they share the photo. And so we constantly looked at that one goal of the time for that whole complete experience, but we also broke it down as well. And then the next thing is in terms of cross collaboration is, I'm sure you use Asana or Monday, really sharing that board, those projects with other people in the company, and then reviewing with your stakeholders. So in the case of Lightroom, reviewing with other internal stakeholders to say regular marketing, the marketing group or the product group, share with them what your priorities are and have them kind of express their opinions about your priorities. So in most of the companies I've worked in, just been really transparent about what the team's projects are and getting feedback from folks. So those are 3 kind of internal approaches. I'm currently at Clary, and so we have a big thing where we collaborate with our customers. And just so you know, I consider customers as part of the collaboration. I consider customers as part of the team. At Intuit, even we had customers sit in our staff meetings. So taking a page from that Intuit playbook, we formed the Clary coaches who are helping produce content. They're helping produce Clary courses, for example. And so in that case, they need to understand what our priorities are. They need to understand what products or services we're working on. So I just treat them as an extended member of the team. I work with them on creating content. And then also to get their feedback, we have very open alpha, beta, and MVPs. So for example, on the community site now and the knowledge base, we have a new federated search, a new chatbot, and basically it's open for anybody to give us feedback on, right? So it's not like showing it to a small group. I think it's really important, as much as you're comfortable with, of partnering with your customers and getting feedback as soon as possible. Field trips. So this is another way to collaborate with customers. So with Apple, basically, they didn't call it digital success then, but by the way, in all these companies, digital success, digital self-serve, we're really focused on inbound activities such as, people look at knowledge base, community, university, etc., but also outbound activities as well, such as email. And in getting feedback on these programs um, at Apple, basically we adopted a customer. It's really interesting. Several groups within marketing each had a customer or an account that they adopted and were responsible for interacting with them on a weekly basis. We invited our team everybody in our team to visit the customer and really see what's going on their desktops, whether it's their physical desktop or their computer desktop. I think you can learn a lot about how somebody works by seeing how they're organized in their day-to-day activities. And then working with them, again, we had them part of the team to really design a unified experience. So people working in digital success, digital self-serve want to have that common interface, common UX, UI, whether it's you're going to the knowledge base, whether you're going to community, or whether you're sending out emails. And then the next customer example is getting behind the bar. I actually always recommend you get behind the bar for any activities you do. So here I was based, actually, I mentioned I lived overseas. So I lived in Hong Kong and I worked for the head of strategic planning, who many years later I still stay in touch with. And he said to me, we're pitching for the Japanese beer Kirin. We need to figure out how to market it in Hong Kong. And for those people who know history, Asian history, Hong Kong audience didn't always have a great impression or a great feeling about the Japanese. So in order to really understand my market, even though we're talking digital, I really got behind the bar and interacted with the human beings. So I worked as a bartender, I interacted with the distributors, and I basically would talk a lot to customers. It was probably one of the best assignments. I mean, imagine your manager saying, okay, you can sleep late and you can go out at night and be a bartender. So, but I think the idea of just getting behind the bar, walking in your customer's shoes is really important. The next thing is when you design programs, I basically have adopted a Japanese philosophy here. So when I was in Japan, I worked really closely for some reason with architects, or I hung out with architects, and they have a really interesting philosophy. Basically, in America, the architect designs the building and maybe we'll go back and look at the building over time. In Japan, the architect actually goes back every year and inspects the building and will also make recommendations on how to improve either the interior of the building or the outside of the building. And so I think this is really important in terms of stepping back with your team or with your customers and getting feedback on what's working. And then also just dissecting your programs. There's many email programs that are just left to run on autopilot. So constant, fine tuning, continuous improvement is really important. Same with, how you develop, say, your knowledge base, your community, your LMS. A really good example is, we're every 6 months, we look at our LMS courses, our university courses, and say how we can improve them. A common or obvious answer is maybe the courses are too long and we need to break them up into smaller courses. Maybe we need to sprinkle in more more like takeaways, or we need to add customers as well to teach part of the course. Okay. So the next one is neither, well, I guess it's both working with your employees, but also working with your customers. I can't share with you who the customer is or who the company is because that wouldn't be proper. So I'm calling it the UFO, the Unidentified Frustrating Organization. So in this case, I basically pitched that we should have a shared metric with another team. Both teams were working, say, for example, the product team and I were working on integrating self-serve inside the product, and we should have a shared metric to evaluate our success. This was shot down at this company. The company really believed at first, or the manager, that we should all have our own metrics, and I think unfortunately that's how a lot of OKRs are set up. Um, but the problem is, that who's responsible if you don't meet that metric, the product team or myself? And so what would happen was the product team and I would basically go in and present the same results in two different meetings. I've seen this happen in many companies, not just that one UFO. So in the end, however, I was able to escalate it. It took months to really have a cross cross functional shared metric. And so I think if you can do that, since digital success, digital self serve, and even customer success does a lot of cross work collaboration, is try and get that single metric. And that will also help, when you celebrate success and having um, a clear line of sight. I'm just reading what Mike wrote right here. Yeah, asking who is responsible. Yeah, exactly. So I'm a big believer in some of the themes here are, sitting with the other teams, getting customers involved, and having those shared metrics. A lot of this can make you uncomfortable and make your team members uncomfortable, but it's a little blurry on the screen here. But basically, it says getting out of your comfort zone is where the magic happens, and I really believe that. And as a manager, I always am trying to just be honest with my team members and ask, or be honest, but be a little direct with my team members and say, when you're working with others, what makes you uncomfortable or what works really well. At Clary, it's really interesting. One of the cultural things is sometimes when people are uncomfortable about saying something, we'll, before we phrase the question, we'll say, I'm about to share a spicy comment. And at first, I was kind of like, I'm a New Yorker, so I'm kind of like obnoxious sometimes. I was like, "What? Spicy comment? Everything should be spicy." But then, in reflecting on it, I thought it was really good because, like, some people just are not comfortable with expressing doubts or concerns in front of others. And I know we're talking about, digital, we're talking about cross-functional work, but I think this is really a key point. So very famous, as I wrap up here, kind of a traditional or famous saying here is, if you want to go fast, go alone. And I think early in my career, I did a lot of that. I broke a lot of things. Um, but to go far, I think it's good to go together. And digital is a team sport. I think a lot of times people ask me, okay, what's the degree you integrate humans into your communications? And they're talking probably most of the time about digital interactions or human interactions with customers. But I think when you work with your team, those human interactions are really important. And just like that growth squad, can you stay together for a long period of time? Because that's where the magic happens. So I think in terms of key takeaways today, I would suggest you try one of the things I recommended, having a customer attend your staff meetings or sit in your staff meetings. I would try and get a shared metric. I've gone through several things here, so you can really decide what works for you. Start simple, right? Just take one day at a time and one project at a time and build from there. And that's true with all digital projects. And I believe that, I've experienced a lot of celebration here with team members and a lot of really good moments. The shared metric, thank you, Courtney. Already noodling on it. I'm more than happy to help you noodle on it. I'm not a very good cook, but we can do that. And then spicy question, with all those learnings, what still feels hard about digital today? I think the things that are hard are, I do advise some companies, and I think a lot of, we've leaned on the human first approach so much. And so I have a bias towards the digital approach, but I think getting people to really experiment with a digital approach and move away from that. I use the analogy a lot of when I was growing up, the ATM machine came out. When the ATM machine came out, people were like, "What? You need to hand me my money. I can't go to a machine and get it. I want to see a teller." Which is ironic because today actually I'm going to a bank to get a debit card for my son, which is crazy that I have to go to the bank. But when the ATM machine came out, people were like, "I need to talk to a banker still." And now look where we are today. And then when my kids grow up, they're teenagers. The ATM machine's gonna go away because they'll just use Apple Pay or Google Pay. So I think the first thing that's hard is really getting in alignment on doing that first digital test. The second thing is I'm finding that doing digital self-serve, digital success, we're still content creators. I think when I started doing all this, I was hoping to be more a curator and an aggregator, which is why I leaned on user created content. But I still find that we're creating content ourselves or figuring out, working with internal folks. So those are the two things that stand out for me. I started off talking about teams. When you successfully implement some of these stuff, or you talk to a customer, that's my nirvana. It's just great sitting with a customer or sitting with somebody, getting off my butt at Marketo and going from the third floor to the fourth floor and sitting with product. And so what I leave you with today, oh, I had a video here. Let me see if I can, anyway, what I leave you with today, oh, here it is. Oops, start again.
No puede.
I'm just saying, if you're not going to try this, go big, go home. Anyway, that's that. Sorry, the video didn't work out as well as I wanted. I'm now figuring out how to turn off the video. Okay. Anyway, so that's a summary. I spoke for about 22, 23 minutes. I'd love to answer any questions you have, whether it's from Colorado, or whether it's from California or someplace else.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for that. There are a couple that came in privately here that I'd love to share with you. So you were talking about getting alignment on shared metrics, and you're at the UFO company where you got a little bit of pushback on that. And so a big question that came up was like, hey, I'm experiencing something similar. How looking in retrospect, how would you have gotten alignment on those shared metrics if you were up against the same wall that you previously were up against?
Yeah. Persistence. Again, I'm kind of Californian outside, laid back, but inside, I said I'm kind of elbowy and aggressive, but I wouldn't be too aggressive. I think, it probably has to start at the C level. So I would talk to, unless you are the C level, I would talk to your manager and see if you can get them on the same page and have them talk to their peer. That's probably one place to start. Um, yeah, it's really tough, that we're so siloed. I think think about it. I always say there's so many customer facing roles: customer marketing, customer support, customer success. We're all talking to the same customers. And in some cases, we're presenting the same data to our organization. So I don't have a silver bullet, but that's what I did is I really started, trying to get one company, my manager, now it was my manager actually, who wasn't aligned with that. So I'm not sure I would recommend this, but I did go to other C-level folks. And part of that depends on your culture. Like if it's a very open culture, then that works. If it's not a very open, might not be the right word, but I will admit, like sometimes I have gotten slapped for doing something like that, where I'm going to another C-level person. But I'm really can't say it'd be better. Like this shared metric thing is really important. And I would say if you have OKRs, and I've been able to do this at Clary, I've said, like, I have a shared metric with somebody from support. I have a shared metric with somebody from customer success. Right. So that's another way to approach it, is go to the other group and say, can we partner on this if we have the shared metric?
So is that how you would typically get buy-in from other resources? Would it be looking at the shared metric that you guys are all kind of like operating towards or rowing against? Or what are some other ways or strategies that you've used to get buy-in from other resources or from other
Yeah.
departments that may be not seeing your vision?
Yeah. So at the Intuit company, I thought of us, even though we were in different groups, I thought of us as a center of excellence. And my ego says, just think of yourself as a center of excellence. And so, you are highlighting your priorities, but then work with your stakeholders and have them review your priorities and ask them if they can help out. If they're aligned with your priorities, then try and find out if it's aligned with them, right? So I started out talking about the C level pretty much, but now I'm talking about the guys in the digital trenches like yourself, right? And see if you can get aligned on like the priorities you're doing. So it's, culture is such a big thing here, the company culture. And I showed you 7 companies and 7 very different cultures.
For sure, for sure. And with that, I guess another question that comes up or comes to mind is, you know, sometimes departments can be pretty territorial over their number and the resources they have available to them. So how do you deal with a team that might be a bit territorial?
Yeah. Um, that's where you got to like, negotiation, really trying, what did Stephen Covey said, seek to understand first before,
Yep,
right? So I think it's really trying to understand them. You know, for me, all this stuff I know it's a tough job market, but sometimes you might have to make the call that it's not the right culture, right? But yeah, so really, I think and I know it's not the best answer, is really trying to understand like what, how you can get aligned on priorities. And if they agree that's a priority, is then like, can they cough up resources?
for
So
sure. One of the first books I ever read going into a new job was Daniel Pink's Everybody Sells. So what you're kind of describing is very much that. Are you about to pull it out? There it is. Yeah. Oh, to sell is human. That's right. To sell is human. Not everybody sells, but that's right. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
sorry, I
So
used to be a teacher, so I'm like, yeah.
no, I love it. I love it. That was one of the first ones that I read. I see Jamie just came off. So
Yeah.
I thought on that last question to start his idea, he's cross functionally. Yeah, for sure. Focus
Yeah.
on the art of the possible.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Definitely, definitely like what's the desired outcome, but what can you like over deliver on, or what's possible? And thinking out of the the called box. But alignment is really key. So I talked about alignment on priorities, but even that single true north. What's that single metric? Going back to the Adobe example, we had 5 people from, maybe I wasn't clear on this, from 5 different parts of the company, right? We were kind of on loan to this growth project, and it was a great example of cross-functional work, and then figuring out like, okay, what's this desired outcome, which I call it the waltz. And what was really interesting, Jamie, was that the original assignment was, we have this thing, Adobe would say, we have this thing called the last mile, the first mile, which was the first 30 days somebody had Lightroom. And the art of the possible, which now will sound funny when I say this, was what can they do in 24 hours? Can we get them to do that waltz? Remember, import, share, and edit within 24 hours. And at first, people were like, no way, like, come on. But we got there, right? So, I mean, probably sounds obvious now. If you do digital photography, you should be able to do all that. Um, but at that time, people are like, we've always been 30 days. And so this group, cross-functional team, we had this, our true north. We started with the idea, the BHAG idea, and the art of the possible.
I love it. I love it. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, it looks as though that this is the end of this session, and we'll be wrapping it up. So, if there are any other questions that we weren't able to get to, or if they come up later on, we will be passing those questions along to Scott so we can share his answers, along with a recording of this session, which is going to be posted and published in our resource hub on Matic.io. All of you, all of the attendees that are here today, will be notified when the recordings are live, and so please be on the lookout for that. But in the meantime, thank you all for attending, and thank you, Scott, for joining and doing such a wonderful presentation for all of us today.
Yeah, David, thank you for orchestrating this. And then thank you, everybody, for the questions and attending. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Talk to y'all soon. Enjoy the day.